In the haunting beauty of Sinners, we met a man who was more than a musician, more than a storyteller, more than a sage. He was a griot, a keeper of memory, a spirit walker whose voice was older than the empires themselves. He wasn't just a character. He was a mirror reflecting something many of us had forgotten. That before Africa was enslaved, colonized, or renamed, she was sung into being by those who remembered her story. And that story didn't begin with sin. It began with song. Sinners may be fiction, but the griots are real. For thousands of years, across forests and savannas, from the mouth of the Niger to the walls of Timbuktu, griots were the soul of West Africa. They were not mere musicians, they were living archives. Their tongues carried history. Their voices awakened the ancestors. They were chosen by spirit, not status. And through rhythm, they preserved a people's identity, spirituality, and sacred memory. This is the story behind the story. The history behind the legend. The truth that sinners hinted at, but history buried. Today we dig it up. We remember. This is not just about music. It's about who we are. This is the griots, voices of spirit and memory. Before the written word, before the colonizers ink-marked maps with new names, Africa remembered. She remembered through rhythm, through voice, through those chosen not by crown or conquest, but by memory. They were not just singers. They were not just storytellers. They were griots. And for thousands of years, the griot was the living library, the sacred vessel of African spirituality, history, and cosmic truth. This is their story. And through their story we return to ours. In the heart of West Africa, from Mali to Senegal, from Guinea to the Gambia, griots were born into lineage, not profession. They weren't trained, they were chosen. Known by many names, Jolly among the Mandinka, Jewel among the Wolof, Ngoni players to others. The griots are older than empires. They existed before Ghana, before Mali, before Songhai. They are the original timekeepers of African civilization. While the West crowned its bards and poets, Africa anointed griots with a sacred responsibility. To remember, to remind, to resurrect. They held the genealogy of kings, the laws of the land, the names of ancestors, and the spiritual code of the people. They were not entertainers. They were guardians of African truth. In African cosmology, the past is never dead. It lives. It breathes. It speaks. The griot is the bridge between the living and the dead, a spiritual diplomat who channels the wisdom of the ancestors through story and sound. They do not merely recite history. They invoke it. A griot song is not performance, it is prayer. When a griot sings the names of those long gone, they are calling them back into the circle. They remind the people, you are not forgotten. Your struggle was not in vain. It is said that the griot does not forget. Even when entire cities fall, the griot remembers who built them. Even when empires collapse, the griot remembers who bled for them. In many West African traditions, especially among the Mande peoples, griots were present at every major spiritual rite. Birth, naming, initiation, marriage, death, coronation. Before a king was crowned, a griot spoke, not just to praise the king, but to remind him of his ancestors, of his duty, of the cosmic balance between power and humility. They reminded the king, you do not rule alone. You rule under the gaze of your ancestors, under the silence of the spirits. This spiritual role made griots untouchable, even in times of war. To harm a griot was to offend the ancestors. To silence a griot was to sever the link between the world and the sacred. The griot did not only speak. They sang. They chanted. They drummed. Their instruments were more than tools. They were extensions of spiritual power. The kora, with its 21 strings, represents the connection between the heavens and the earth. The balafon, a wooden xylophone, echoes ancestral joy and remembrance. The ngoni, ancestor of the banjo, sends sonic messages across the spirit world. The talking drum speaks a language of its own, mimicking human tone and emotion. Together, these instruments create a spiritual vibration, a soundscape where the ancestors walk again, and the spirit becomes audible. Not all griots were men. Across regions and centuries, female griots, known as griots, held powerful positions. They sang lullabies that carried ancestral strength. They performed during birthing ceremonies and funerals. They remembered the stories of women often left out of royal lineage. In a world that tried to silence African women, the griots' voice was defiance. Their songs preserved the feminine divine. Their stories nurtured generations. Their gift was not just song, it was resistance through remembrance. When Africans were kidnapped and chained, when languages were banned, drums confiscated, names stripped, the griots carried their legacy in memory. In the Americas, griot traditions morphed into the blues, gospel, jazz, and hip-hop. In Brazil, griots whispered through capoeira. In Haiti, they danced through voodoo. In the American South, they moaned through Negro spirituals. Every time a black person told a story, played a drum, or passed down a name, the griot lived on. Even under the boot of colonization, griots refused to forget. They became living monuments to a history the colonizer tried to erase. In African spiritual systems, memory is sacred. Whether in the Yoruba's Oriki, the praise names of ancestors, or in Dogon cosmology songs of creation, or in Bakongo ritual chants, the griot carries not just history but the spiritual frequency of the people. Their voice activates sacred timelines. Their memory connects present struggle to ancestral triumph. Their songs align the community with cosmic truth. In Africa, to lose memory is to lose power. And so the griot becomes not just the keeper of the past, but the guardian of spiritual alignment. The griot never died. They evolved. Today you'll find griots in a hip-hop artist like Kendrick Lamar and Nas, spoken word poets in Johannesburg and Nairobi, praise singers at weddings and funerals in Ghana, TikTok creators reviving oral tradition. Modern griots may not carry a kora, but they carry truth. They remind us that African spirituality is not locked in the past. It is vibrant, evolving, breathing through beats and rhymes. The griot reminds us, remember who you are. Your story didn't begin with chains. It began with drums, with names, with spirit. In a world of misinformation, forgetfulness, and rapid erasure, the griot remains necessary. They anchor us. They hold up a mirror to our history. They protect what colonization tried to delete. They heal wounds through truth. And above all, they keep Africa's soul alive. Because memory is not luxury. It's survival. To forget your story is to become a ghost in your own land. But to remember? That is to live again. The griot is not a relic. The griot is a guide. And now, more than ever, we must listen. Because in every song they sing, in every name they whisper, in every ancestor they call back, they are telling us the truth. We were never lost. We were only waiting to remember. If this story moved you, don't let it fade. Like this video. Subscribe for more African history and spiritual truth. Comment below. What story do you think the griots still need to tell? Let's bring the voice of Africa back to the world. Let's remember.